Howdy y'all, Gooman here to talk about another game I'm a huge fan of and wanted to showcase. V Rising is described on its wiki as an open-world, top-down, hack-and-slash sandbox survival game where you play as a fledgling vampire. Your goal is to use the resources you collect from enemies and the environment to hunt down numerous bosses in the world, which will progressively unlock the ability to fight stronger enemies and collect more advanced resources until you work your way up to challenge Dracula himself. The game initially entered early access in May of 2022, which was when I first bought into it, and launched its official 1.0 version almost exactly a year ago. V Rising is developed and self-published by Stunlock Studios, who are still hard at work bringing massive updates to the game like the Invaders of Oakville 1.1 update from about a week ago, which brings significant additions to the gameplay as well as worthwhile updates to its existing systems. I love this game. I'm a huge sucker for sandbox survival games like Minecraft and Conan Exiles, and V Rising easily takes my top spot for the entire genre. I love the setting, the vibes, the base building, everything about this game comes together in a wonderful package that's all tied together by its centerpiece feature, the combat. I'm just going to jump into the game now so I can show you what it's all about. The goal of this video is to give you a cut-down experience of the first hour or so of a new playthrough with my commentary over it, ending with fighting the first of many bosses you have access to. Let's go! So right off the bat, you have the option to play the game fully solo. The entire progression system is balanced around playing by yourself. You can also play with a group of friends in a cooperative style where you're going through the game together, and you can even play in a full-scale PvP faction war kind of thing where you can either be by yourself or as part of a team. You can compete with other players against who can amass power the fastest. I personally prefer to play by myself. I just have the most fun that way, but the game is also very fun with a group. As your character wakes up and leaves the crypt, the game will give you a series of very simple missions that you can see in the top left that will teach you step by step on how to interact with the game and unlock the initial steps of your progression system. In this game, you raise your level by unlocking and crafting new equipment. That's the number next to your health bar. You can also see this value in your character page. Your gear level is how V Rising tells you how strong you are relative to your enemies. As you continue, the tutorial will start unlocking your spell slots. The first spell you have access to is called Shadow Bolt, which is a projectile type spell. The game has multiple schools of magic like blood, lightning, frost, and each spell school revolves around a unique gimmick. The first few spells have access to are part of the blood magic school, which is all about inflicting a debuff on your enemies that will heal you as you attack them. And just as another example, the frost school is all about slowing down your enemies and freezing them in place. And within the magic schools, each individual spell follows a pretty simple archetype like dashing, projectile, shielding, and it's up to you as the player to figure out what combination of these skills you want to use for your preferred playstyle. The world of V Rising holds a lot of lootable containers like coffins and chests, so don't forget to explore. As you leave the tutorial area, you'll want to keep following the objectives on the top left of your screen. Those will help guide you to what you want to do next. So your next couple of objectives are to complete your starter set of armor. In order to craft your gloves and boots, you'll need to find some animal hides by fighting the wild creatures like deer and wolves. And as you fight your first creatures, you may notice a new button prompt on screen called Feed. Feeding is part of the very important blood mechanic of the game. So most enemies in the game that aren't skeletons or zombies will come with some form of blood. Most animals share the creature blood type, and as you absorb that blood within you, you will unlock a series of passive benefits that are tied to that blood type. So the creature blood type that you can absorb from animals will come with its own set of benefits. And as you come across different human enemies like rogues, brutes, warriors, civilians, each of these come with different passive abilities that may be useful in different situations based on your playstyle. Blood also comes in various percentages of purity. The higher the purity, so the higher the percentage, the stronger your passive benefits will be. So if you come across an enemy with a high percentage next to their health bar, I highly recommend you going for it for the stronger passives. The blood itself is also a resource. When you take damage, your health can passively regenerate little by little, which will spend some of that blood. There are a couple of abilities in the game that you can use by spending the blood as a resource. And if you let your blood reach 0, you will start to take damage. So you want to make sure that you have a good amount of blood. Feeding on an enemy and going through the animation will completely refill your blood meter. However, this will overwrite your passive blood effects as well. So let's say you have a 90% blood of the creature type, but you're almost out, you're going to want to refill it. However, keep in mind that, let's say you come across a 5% warrior blood, you will refill the blood, which will take you out of danger, but you will be replacing your powerful passive effects with a much weaker one. At the start of the game, your access to blood is limited just to the enemies that you come across. However, as you get further into the game, you will unlock a mechanic that will essentially let you save blood to be consumed later. So you can make a collection of 100% rogue type bloods that you can refill anytime that you want. I'll leave it at that. I'll let you find out how it works for yourself. And just to wrap this part up, if you don't need to refill your blood, you can still use feed in combat. If you abort the feeding by hitting the button on screen, it acts as an execute ability that will destroy your target outright. And because feeding acts as a sort of dash, you can use it as a powerful mobility tool to potentially get you out of danger. Just keep in mind that feed has a cooldown timer between uses. Continue following the objectives and craft the new items you unlock. The axes and mace come with a damage bonus against certain resources for faster gathering, but they are also fully fledged combat weapons on par with your sword. Collect stone and wood by whacking at rocks and trees, and you will eventually unlock the ability to build the castle heart, which is your first step into building your base. Base building may only be possible on designated build locations, however, they are all over the map and each location may have advantages based on your specific needs. Finding a good location to build your castle might be a challenge without experience in the game, but if you wanted some guidance, I tend to like building my first base somewhere in the top middle of the Farbane Woods due to the proximity to important points of interest along your progression path, including the final boss of the area. Once you pick a spot, clear some space and put down your castle heart and keep following the objectives to learn how to build. The coffin is your respawn point, chests store your items, and the mist brazier protects you from sunlight. Oh, I didn't mention sunlight at all. You are a vampire in this game, so any average gamer should be able to relate to the dangers of sunlight. If you stay under the sun for too long, you will take massive amounts of damage, so seek the shade or shelter whenever you can. Palisades won't do much for you right now, but you will eventually be able to build proper castle walls that can support a roof overhead. Until then, the mist brazier is a wonderful tool that consumes bones to create a mist that blocks sunlight in a small area, which should be enough for an early workspace. Refinement stations will turn your raw resources into more advanced forms. With enough wood planks, you can put down a workbench, unlocking a whole suite of new equipment to increase your level. Craft and equip what you can, then the game will tell you about V-Bloods. Bosses in this game are called V-Blood carriers, and you can unlock additional steps in your progression by defeating them and consuming their blood. Selecting Track Blood will activate a visual effect you can follow to the V-Blood's location. Our first target is Alpha the White Wolf, so let's set out towards him. Our enemies in this game exactly aren't all friends with each other either. Humans, undead, wild animals all hate each other and will constantly fight if their paths cross. Although most of the bosses you fight will have their own isolated arena, you can always take advantage of enemies fighting each other if they were designed to roam around, like Alpha. Here I came across him fighting an undead, so I started with an advantage. At half health, V-Bloods drop orbs you can collect to not only heal yourself, but refill a tiny portion of your active blood. As my fight continued, a much stronger roaming boss called Goreswine ended up interrupting our fight, and he ended up finishing the last third of the encounter for me. Don't worry, they don't steal your credit for the kill, so you can swoop in and feed once they're done. Goreswine was a bit strong for me, so I decided to disengage and escape. Now we can check out the new ability Alpha unlocked for us, which is the Wolf Shapeshift form. You can't fight as a wolf, but you can run much faster, making it a very useful traversal tool throughout the entire rest of the game. I wanted to keep this video short, so I'm going to stop the showcase there. I do hope what you saw is enough to convince you how awesome V-Rising is, even if I barely scratched the surface. There are, I think, 10 weapon types in total, each with secondary attacks I didn't get to show you. Over 50 spells across 6 magic schools, a dozen non-combat baseline vampire abilities, over 20 character passives to choose from, in addition to around 10 different blood types you have access to. All of that is in service to take down over 60 unique bosses throughout your journey. This game is huge, and the challenge will constantly ramp up to meet your power level. The game retails for $35, but is currently 50% off for a weekend deal for the next couple weeks, so I highly recommend picking it up while it's cheap. I am not sponsored or affiliated, I just love this game and I want you to play it. The Steam store page is linked in the description. Before I close out this video, I wanted to make some final notes about game settings and a couple of recommendations I wanted to make for your first playthrough. So game settings are obviously a way to customize your playing experience. You can change your settings at any time. So if you go to start a new game, you can go into the game settings from here, change all the settings that you want. If I were to load up the world that I started for the video, I can go to the bottom right, hit edit settings, and you can change the same settings. So most of the default settings I think are fine when you're just starting out, but there might be a point where you come across something and you're like, I don't like how this works. And I'm gonna point out a couple of them right now. In the general game settings, we'll ignore most of the top stuff. Once you go to items, the most important setting that I usually change when I'm playing by myself is teleport bound items. So throughout the world map, there are multiple way gates that you can travel across. They're your fast travel points. Basically, you can even put down your own way gates in your castles. Now, by default, the teleport bound item setting is enabled, which on the right, it'll say that there are some items in the game that will prevent you from using those way gates. I like to turn this off. The only thing this setting does for me as a solo player is that it just forces me to walk from A to B, which takes way longer than just being able to teleport. If I have the teleportation network all just set up, it just saves time. That's kind of it. Why take 10 minutes to do something that should only realistically take 10 seconds when that extra time doesn't add a whole lot to the experience? So I just turn it off, just make the teleportation unlimited, travel as much as you want. That's how I like to do it. While you're messing with the settings, if you ever forget what the default position was, you can always click the blue arrow, the return button right next to each of these settings to change it back to default. A couple of other settings I like to mess around with in general. When we go to item settings, looking at inventory stacks and multiplier, some stackable items in the game to me have really low stack amounts. For example, the copper ore has a stack limit of, I believe, 200, at which point additional pickups will take up another inventory slot, especially in the early game when there are so many different kinds of items you can collect. It can get a little bit annoying. Your progression kind of slows down by the virtue of the fact that you can only carry so much of one item. So I like to crank this up 1.5, maybe even 2, depending on how I'm feeling. Again, this just saves me the time going back from A to B. I could just carry everything in one go, so if that's the whole point of my trip to a location. And much in the same way, the material yield multiplier. So this governs the amount of resources you get from like whacking at a tree or a rock. Setting this higher will just save you more time in the long run. If you want your experience to be closer to what the developers intended, just keep all these default, it's up to you. With the amount of time I spent on this game, it's not important for me to spend the maximum amount of time hitting the tree. So I like to crank this up. 1.25 is a pretty good spot. 1.5, like this is about all I need to have an enjoyable experience. If I were to set this higher, it does start to feel a little bit pointless. But those are the two options that I do change pretty much on every new playthrough. The rest can stay 1, it's fine. The loot amount is fine. These are kind of in-game systems, they're fine. Blood essence, those are the little red balls that you collect from fighting enemies. In the very beginning, it might feel low, but as you get farther into the game, you're amassing thousands of these. Default is fine on this one. And then one more tab I wanted to look at is the building tab. This is ultimately just for fun for me. I love having multiple bases in my playthroughs, and the default castle heart limitation of 2 makes it so that you can only ever have 2 castles on the map. I don't see a point in limiting this number personally. So I just crank it up to the max, which is 5. Build the castles that you want, have multiple locations. One of the fun parts of this game is coming across like a cool looking area and you're like, oh, I want to build a castle that looks like this. This will just let you do that. Have a little bit of fun. I think that's totally fine. This will also give you the opportunity to set up like a more precise teleportation network if that matters to you, or it'll just let you take advantage of some cool scenery that you wanted to build on top of. I think that's a totally valid thing to want to do. As you play the game for yourself and experience the progression, you might come across something to where like, oh, I wish I could change that. And I can almost guarantee you that there is an option to change that. I think all the other settings are just fine on default, especially anything that deals with your power, like the damage you deal, physical power multiplier. This will exponentially increase the amount of damage you do with every new tier of a weapon. I do not recommend moving this up because the fun of the game is the challenge. But obviously if you're struggling and not having fun, then do whatever you want, right? But again, that's the kind of thing that you might want to hold off until you have more experience with the game. But that's pretty much it. Just to summarize real quick, turn off the limitations on your teleportation, save a little bit of time on your resource collection, and make more castles. I think those settings should help improve your first time experience with the game, and at any point if you feel like you're overpowered for any reason, obviously change it all back to default. Boom. So that's it from me. Please check out V Rising. It's an awesome game. It deserves to be played. I might make an update post about whatever video projects I'm working on. But aside from that, I'll see y'all in the next one. Take care of yourselves, be good to each other, and go forth and suck out blood. I'm not kidding. Bye!